Okay, so really all we're going to do this morning is go over the Ticketmaster challenge. If you looked ahead or if you looked at today's curriculum, there's no new stuff to do. So today's kind of a catch-up day. So if you feel like you made it, you feel like you've understood everything, you completed everything, this might be a good day to just like knock out a ton of that AWS stuff. If there's stuff you feel like you want to go back and do Django related, then that's probably a good idea, because tomorrow we're going to make a huge shift back to JavaScript, and we're going to start React. And React is going to be a big, it's just a big switch in the way that we're going to kind of think about some of this stuff. Some will carry over into some will be brand new. I'm going to introduce it tomorrow. It will probably confuse the hell out of you. It confused the hell out of me for like the first week I worked with it. So I'll introduce it tomorrow, very, very small. And then on Thursday, I believe, we're having like an actual React developer come in from TableXI, and he's going to go over it and hopefully talk a little bit more about best practices, how it works in production. John and I know React pretty well. We've been teaching it for a while, but it's not a thing that we've ever worked on like a giant project with, so we're trying to get more of that experience in here. Cool. So how did the Ticketmaster thing go? How many people finished it? Oh, good. Awesome. Awesome. So since there was really no lesson today, I thought like going over it would be a good idea. One, for people who didn't finish it, and two, just so we can reinforce. I think it's a good challenge that reinforces a bunch of the concepts that we've talked about for the last 2 weeks, especially like thinking about the server and the client, and thinking about like where data is coming from. So real quick, because I love to draw pictures, I just want to draw out the data flow of how this is going to work when we sit down and solve it. So what we want to do is basically, what do we want? We want someone to be able to hit our website, enter an artist, and then we return them a map that has the next, what is it, 5 concerts on the map, right? I heard someone talking about like it doesn't really return you the next 5. Who was saying that? Yeah?
Yeah, it doesn't. The API request sorts it in a weird way. So when you make the request, you got to do some added things to list it, right?
Well, that's good noticing that. I was like, cool, 5. I don't care. Putting them on a map, like 5 concerts. So we may or may not address that, but that's an interesting point to bring up. Remind me, because we'll talk about the frustration that can come with dealing with these APIs, and that they're not always going to. It's not always going to go smoothly. All right. Okay, but the general workflow we want is someone has their computer, and they make an API, or they make a GET request to a server, which is our Django app, right? So they're going to make a GET request. We're going to return them an HTML form. So far, so good. They're going to get that form up here, and it's just going to have like one input, and they're going to type in whatever they want, and then they're going to submit. So that's going to make a post request back to our server with some data in it, right? So this we've done before, right? All of this we've done before. So they make a GET request, we return the form. They press submit on the form, and it posts to our thing. This is the exact same workflow we do when we create something new in the data. We want the user to create a new resource in the database, right? Send them a form, they send it back. The difference here is when we get the form with the post request, we need to take the data out of it, and then we need to send it to another server, which is Ticketmaster, right? So we send that data to Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster returns the data to us. I know this data is not the best. And we get it back on our server. Then we need to like do something with that data. Put in template. And then we send that back. So we've added sort of this extra little loop here, right? Where we have to hit the Ticketmaster server. It comes back to our server, we do something with that data, and then we send it back to the client. I feel like everybody has a good handle on this, but I just wanted to make sure, are there any questions about the sort of flow of data here? Yeah?
It seemed like the way you have to do it is you have to take whatever the user submits,
right,
and actually put it inside of a database first. And then, is there any way to bypass?
We're not going to, when we built this, we're not going to make a database at all. So we don't have to do a database, no. Why did you feel like you had to put it in the database?
I guess I couldn't think of another way, and I was just kind of using the previous models.
Yeah.
Like you, kind of like a blog post where you take the user input and then you save it in a database, and then you can take whatever's in the database
out. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And sometimes you might want to do that, right? Depending on what your app does. But since we're not letting users like save their favorite concerts. Like if that was something we wanted to do, if you wanted to have them be able to save the history of their searches or something, absolutely, create it in the database. But since all we're really doing is we're just a middleman. We're just like middlemaning ourselves right now. We don't need to save anything in the database. We can just take that data directly from that post request and make our own post request, or our own get request, sorry, and then return and get it returned. So good question, very good question. Other questions? Yeah.
We'll probably get to it, but I felt like there should have been like, Django should add a way to talk to another site and get something in. I couldn't find anything about it. I just found like Python libraries.
Yeah. Did you end up using requests?
Yeah.
How many people use requests? Yeah. I thought that was built into Django, and maybe it is, and I just didn't research it enough, but I ended up having to install it. So, yeah, it may or may not be in there. I don't know. I ended up having to just use that outside library, which is common. Cool. All right, so we'll build as much of this as we can. I will also admit I did finally get everything on the map, but like it was like the end of the day, and I was just like throwing JavaScript at it that I kept finding on Stack Overflow, and I was like, oh, finally it works. And then I left, and then this morning I opened it, and I was like, I kind of know how this works. So we'll see when we get to the JavaScript part how well I can do. But we can do all this at the very least and talk about the real lesson here is just interacting with an API. Interacting with an API, because you're going to do it so much. So we'll spend most of our time on this, and then if we get to the map part, great. If not, also great. Okay? Cool. I'm going to erase this.
But here's fine. I was wondering, the post from the user, the post request from the user, was that a GET request from the user? Like, I didn't even think we were using the post request because we're not posting anything to anything.
Right, so that's a good question. Like, so real quick, so Bobby's saying like we're not creating anything in the database, right? So the only reason we're using a post request here is, so post request we usually think of I'm saving something in the database, but it's also a different way to send data. Actually, this is a good thing to bring up real quick. When we want to send data with our request, we can do it in two ways, right? If we send a GET request, then we can put params in the URL, right? I think you can do it with a post as well. So like you've probably seen we're doing like something like www.ticketmaster, I'm just going to abbreviate, .com, and then it's slash, and then there's a question mark, right? You've seen this so many times. So question mark means everything after this are key value pairs, right? So we do this in a GET request, we say question mark, and then we probably, like, we would have, just very common, you'll have something like query equals, you know, I don't know, shoes. I'm looking for shoes on Amazon. I don't know why I always go to shoes. And then there's like the ampersand, and then I can do like color was red, and so on and so forth, right? So question mark means everything's key value pair. I connect them with equal signs, and I separate each one. Instead of like, if this was a dictionary, I'd use a comma, right? But we can't do that, so we use the ampersand. Cool. So this is whenever I want to send data with a GET request, I have to do it this way. Now this works, but it's got a couple of downsides. Like my data is exposed. It is also limited to how many characters. I can't remember the limit, but there's a limit. So when we want to send larger stuff, like a whole blog post, we can't put the whole blog post in the URL. So the way we do it is we do it in a post request. We have like a post request to a endpoint, and then we have like I can't remember. Can someone look up an HTTP request real quick? Or it doesn't. I'll just guess. It's what is it? It's like post and then to / movies or whatever, or blog, and then HTTP, and then there's a bunch of headers, right? Then there's that blank line, a big blank space, and then the next thing down here is the body. And we can put a lot more data down here, right? A ton more data. And so this is the other way to send data over HTTP. So the first way is like this. We can do it in a GET request. In a POST request, we send it in the body. Well, yeah, go ahead.
That body is still just a string, right?
Yes, it's still just a string. It's just separated here, right?
It might be in like JSON format or dictionary format.
It could, yeah, you can format it a ton of different ways. JSON is common. JSON is very common. In fact, when we get to React, we'll be doing sending JSON. Yeah, it's just a string, but it's just we can send more. That's
So
it.
that's what I was gonna say. Like we would use a post request
Right.
when we want to send a large.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So exactly. So the other thing, but we're not sending a large data. We're sending like an artist's name or whatever.
Right.
And the reason we're just going to keep using the post request is because that's just the way the form works. So when we make a request with a form, it makes a request to guess we could do it with a GET. We're going to do it with a post. It will make a request here, but it takes. What's nice about a form is it will wrap all that data up that is in the form and put it in the body for us and key value pair it for us. Make sense? Any other questions before we go?
That's the form built in Django.
Well, I actually just hard-coded a form, but you could use a form built into Django. But I'm just going to use a hard-coded form because it's one input. Yeah, now we're getting in a territory where there were like dozens of ways to do this. I'm just going to show you one way to do it. And also, I feel a little bad because it's one way to do it when you're super frustrated and just want to go home. So that's the way I'm going to show you. Yeah.
So you use a single map and posted all 5 locations?
A single map, yes, it posted all 5
Oh,
locations on it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I just made 5 maps for 5 different
That's what I
locations.
did at first, and then I had to Google around, and I had to write like a bunch of JavaScript to get it to work. So if you didn't do it, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I actually don't think there's so many different versions of that map API, and the one we showed you yesterday, I don't think it allows you to put multiple markers on it. You had to use a different kind of map. So that's fine. If you did 5 maps, that's fine. If you even just didn't get to the map part, but you got 5 things back from the Ticketmaster API and somehow displayed like the names of them, that's great. That was the point, right? Just interacting with the API.
So we were supposed to use JavaScript.
I didn't realize, I don't think you were supposed, you didn't have to, you could have just done the 5 maps. I'm just saying like I could not get it to work without writing some JavaScript. So that was, and I kept trying to avoid it because I didn't feel like that was fair, but then that's just what I ended up having to do. Okay. So let's go over so really what I want to talk about is not so much like solving this, but just what are the steps that we take when we want to interact with an API, a new API, and figure out how to, so sort of what's common among them, what can we figure out is just unique to the Ticketmaster one. Stop. Oh no, is it gonna rain today? That's not cool. I rode my bike and I just like chained it outside. I'm like a little worried now.
The website had any.
Okay. So let's just imagine like, let's imagine like that we don't have all the knowledge we got yesterday. And we just starting from the beginning, right? So you're making your own app, or your boss tells you now you need to use the Ticketmaster API, right? You've never used it before. So this is exactly actually what Mike and I did yesterday, just to get started. So first, 9 times out of 10, if you're going to interact with an API, you're going to need an API key, right? And even if it's a free API, you're going to need the key. And the reason for that is they want to keep track of who's hitting their API, and more than anything, if anybody is abusing the APIs, right? So you usually will go onto the site that you're using the API. You will register. So I already did most of this, so we don't have to go through it. Let's see, am I logged in? Usually you will have to create an account, log in. Let's see, get your API key. Well, that takes forever. You'll log in, you'll register yourself as a user. A lot of times they'll want you to register your site as well. So they can say like josh.com, we expect josh.com paired with this API key to be able to make so many hits to our API a day or whatever. And if it exceeds that, then we know we can either bill him, cut him off, or send him an email. Someone might have hacked your site and they're abusing it, right? So that's the whole reason behind the API keys. Now, paid services, it makes way more sense, right? Because they're charging you and they need some way to identify who's making the API call, and that's done by you sending that API key, and then usually also something called a client secret. So sometimes you'll get these pairs of keys, and you'll send both of them with your requests. All APIs are different, so it's really important to get good at reading the documentation. I would also say that if you want to interact with an API and it doesn't have good documentation, I would be a little weary of that, because that doesn't mean you can't use it, but that might mean it's not well maintained, and that's always a risk with an API, right? You start relying on data from somewhere, and then all of a sudden some people are like, you know what, I don't want to maintain this anymore, I'm done. So then you don't have that data anymore. Something big like this, like Ticketmaster, you can be pretty reliable, right? So let's see, I clicked on get a new key. Okay, and I don't want to open this because it has my secret client. Here, let me pause the video real quick. I just don't want to